What do you believe right now that's making you feel this way? And when you analyse it, you realise how irrational you can be at times.
Every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
It's not sales per se, but the outcome of it is, because people get to know you, they get to see you.
But, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development programme I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated, yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times. And only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews, and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so, into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer, or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk.
Hello, I'm Granger Forson, www.bizsmart-gloucestershire.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn. This time on ScaleUp Radio, I speak with Eoin McQuone, the owner of Go Carbon Positive. Go Carbon Positive is a business that helps SMEs to reduce their carbon impact by calculating, then reducing their carbon footprint. They're based in Gloucestershire and started in 2020, just before the pandemic. Since then, they've grown, and now there are 4 members on the team. Eoin takes us through why the SMEs need to consider their carbon footprint, where all that carbon generation comes from, and what the target of net zero is really all about. As always, we cover a lot in this conversation, including, right from the start, have a clear vision for the business long term. During startup, that is the time to test and create your procedures, as you will soon be too busy to do this important task. And being a thought leader on your website will bring customers to you in time. What is interesting about this conversation is that Eoin could see that the SME businesses would need to play their part to reduce their impact on our climate, but there were so many barriers in their way. So like so many great entrepreneurs, he worked out a way to build a business to help them play their part in achieving the net zero goal. I know you'll get something out of this episode, so let's go over and listen to Eoin. Hello, Eoin McQuone, and welcome to ScaleUp Radio. Would you like to introduce yourself and your business to us, please?
Thank you, Granger. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Eoin McQuone of Go Climate Positive, and we help small and medium-sized businesses to calculate, reduce and offset their carbon footprint. And we also help them to communicate what they're doing in a transparent and open way.
So just to help us in terms of, reduce, calculate carbon footprint. So why would a small business want to go about doing that? And what services do you do that help them to deliver that?
There's 2 main reasons why they start. The first one is because the owner or the person running the business feels it's important that they should do so, and they want to play their part in tackling climate change. That's number one. The second reason they might want to, which is increasingly common, is that some of their customers and clients may be requiring them to do so.
So I'm a positive business owner. I want to reduce my climate impact. Okay. So how would you help me do that? So you talk about calculate and reduce. So what would you do for me?
Well, any good business improvement process, I guess. The first thing you need to do is get a clear vision on where you are today. And most businesses have never looked at their carbon footprint. haven't ever done that. So the first step that's why the first step in the process is to calculate, so that we actually get some data, some facts, and they can see exactly how all the things that they do in their business contribute towards global warming. And essentially that's what your carbon footprint is. It's a measure of how you're contributing towards climate change and global warming. So that's number one, is get the right numbers so you can get a clear sight and understand how all the different activities you do contribute, which ones are contributing largely and which ones are relatively small and negligible. Because obviously then you can tailor your response appropriately.
Yeah. So in terms, what things would you then help businesses identify what to fix, to do, to change? So you've done some calculations with them. What would come next then?
Well, carbon footprint is a lot broader than most people realise. So it includes the obvious things that you might think of, like your energy use, but it also includes all of your business travel and transporting things in and out of the business. Not only that, but it also would include transporting your people to your business. So it includes commuting into the office or factory. If you have people working at home, it includes a proportion of their energy use at home. It includes managing the waste that your business generates. It includes any emissions associated with all the goods and services that you buy. There's this concept known as embodied carbon, which is all of the carbon that's been generated in the manufacture and delivery of the products and services that you buy into you. You may be generating your own emissions, or your products might be when your customers use them and when they're thrown away at the end of their life. All these things come into it. So, it's very much a tailored approach. If you're using a lot of energy, then we'd be talking about energy efficiency in your premises. And we might even be talking about different ways of generating heat that are lower carbon. If you're doing a lot of driving around, a lot of consultants, most of their footprint is in driving to see their clients. So we can talk about either reducing mileage or using a more fuel efficient vehicle, or even can public transport be used from time to time, that kind of thing. If you're shipping a lot of things around, then again, we're looking at, are there more efficient ways of doing the freighting, consolidating loads, hub and spoke, using sea instead of air, all these kind of things. Increasingly, a lot of the couriers and freight carriers are actually, they're very focused on their carbon emissions as well. So they're doing what they can to reduce. So you can look at who's got the most efficient process there. If your employees are commuting in and they're all driving in, are there ways in which you can encourage them to use public transport, or maybe even to use active travel, improving their fitness at the same time, such as, helping them buy a bike or helping them walk in, or car sharing schemes. They can save some money by, sharing cars and vehicles. So all manner of things, but it's very tailored because every business's footprint is a different shape.
Okay, I can definitely see that and understand in terms of those elements. So why would I'm talking about being positive, because I want to reduce my carbon emissions or impact on the environment, etc. Why would some customers need your type of services then? So
the first thing is, if you're involved in any kind of public sector procurement process, if you're selling to the public sector, it's becoming increasingly important to address carbon. Firstly, all the central government contracts now and framework agreements that are worth more than £5 million. If you want to get on one of those, they now have a carbon reduction plan, not only in place, but published on your website. And one of the things that catches a lot of smaller businesses out, they think, well, our contracts aren't worth £5 million. If the framework is worth more than £5 million, even if you're only getting a small portion of that, you still need to have a carbon reduction plan.
Okay.
If you're supplying a large PLC, almost all of the FTSE 100 now have committed to net zero emissions. if you're trying to achieve net zero emissions, that includes all of your supply chain. So that means they're now driving carbon measurement and carbon reduction down through all of their suppliers too, and demanding that they get into that. So if your customer base includes large companies like that, they're going to start requesting it. And we're also seeing it in specific industries a lot, such as construction. The construction industry is very much embracing the whole net zero agenda. And so that's picking up a lot of smaller businesses and construction services businesses who need to address it too.
And there's quite a lot of discussion about net zero these days. You know, we see it everywhere. What is net zero, and how would it impact an SME? And
that's a very good question. There's a lot of confusion over what the term means, and it gets very confused with another piece of jargon, carbon neutral. And people tend to get carbon neutrality and net zero muddled up because there's similarities, but there's some huge differences. So essentially, net zero means eliminating all the emissions you possibly can. You know, includes the name we're trying to get to, but we recognise that it's, you know, there's going to be a small proportion of those emissions which you just can't get rid of. This is where the net part of the work comes in. And what we do then is to say, well, the emissions you can't reduce, you can compensate for effectively by removing an equivalent quantity of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and locking it away.
Okay.
Now, the challenge comes in that first part, we eliminate as much as possible. And a lot of people have different benchmarks as to what in their mind as much as possible means. Some people think it means anything that I can think of now in the next 5 minutes and that we can do this year, that'll do, and then we can offset the rest. Absolutely not. It really is as much as possible by the date that we're all aiming for, which is 2050.
Right.
Now, there's an organisation called the Science Based Targets Initiative, which has helpfully set some guidelines which help us get into context what net zero really means. And what they said is if as an organisation you want to claim to be net zero, then you've got to reduce by at least your emissions by at least 90%. So as much as possible means at least 90% reduction. It's a huge ask.
Yeah.
And a very challenging thing to achieve, and not something which can be achieved quickly or easily, or even indeed under your own initiative in most cases. You know, you're going to need your suppliers and customers, and in some cases the government, to make some changes. So net zero is, you know, it's become an increasingly popular thing to aim for. And it's based on the principle that the UK government, and in fact most of the governments around the world, have committed to achieving net zero. But you know, anybody who's committing to that needs to understand that it's a commitment. It's a long-term commitment that they're signing up to. It's not an easy thing to achieve at all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can definitely
contrast that with that other piece of jargon, carbon neutral.
Mm-hmm.
The big difference there is, to be carbon neutral, you still have to have a reduction plan in place, but you don't have to have reduced your emissions at all. You have to, essentially, you're going to compensate for all of your emissions that you have today.
Right. Just offset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that offsetting can be done either by removing carbon from the atmosphere, as we've discussed, or it can be done by helping somebody else save an equivalent amount of carbon.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, that's helped clear that up in terms of that key thing. So let's talk about Go Climate Positive. And so when did you set it up?
So we officially launched February the 27th, 2020, which is a very auspicious time to start a business, as you can imagine. The roots go back much further than that. The first carbon footprint we calculated was about 6 before that, in the back end of 2019. But but the business wasn't called Go Climate Positive then. And we hadn't created the overall proposition we had. But so that's when the official launch was, early 2020.
And what have you done since? Well, how big are you? What are you achieving today?
Yeah, so it's been amazing, really, the way it's grown. So we've actually, today, we signed up our client number 99. So wow. Very excitingly, we're about to pop over the 100.
Well done.
Which, so, and as you can imagine, starting when we did just before, the first lockdown, it was a slow build. But the last 12 to 18 months, it's really started to build. So, it's exciting. And, we're now in that. I feel like we're at the turning point of the hockey stick where it's about to go crazy. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Brilliant. So how many employees? How big are you? What?
So one of the exciting things, if you'd asked me that 6 weeks ago, I said there were 2 of us. Now there's 4 of us. So we previously that it was just the 2 directors, myself and Steph Lee. But we've taken on our first 2 employees at the start of March. And that's very much a case of putting some of the foundations for scaling up in place. One of them was planned. So we'd planned to take on apprentice, and taking on apprentice was something that I'd always wanted to do. I started my career as an apprentice. Frankly, in our industry, there's a huge gap in terms of skilled people who understand what we do. So we always felt that one of the benefits we can give to the industry is in training people up. So we always had that vision of taking apprentices on, and then we kind of accidentally found somebody else through the process of recruitment who wasn't who was much further in their career than you might expect for an apprentice, but had such great transferable skills that we couldn't really turn her down. So we kind of accidentally recruited 2 when we intended to recruit 1.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's really good. And finding right people to fit your organisation is so powerful. So finding those people rather than
that's why we kind of pushed the That's why we wanted to push the boats out and bring Emily in, because she was so right.
Yeah.
It was one of those, I spent a weekend furiously doing cash flow forecasts and thinking, can we afford it? Can we not? And deciding in the end that we had to go for it, because, as I say, so hard to find the right people. And when they come along, we really wanted to bring them in if we had the opportunity to.
So in the marketplace of calculating your emission, your carbon, and helping businesses to reduce their impact, what makes you different? What makes you successful? What do you think you're best at?
I think there's a few things. Firstly, perhaps most importantly, we are entirely non-judgmental. So there's a lot of people are afraid to start the journey because they think they're going to be told off. And we take the view, look, if you want to improve, that's all we're asking you to do. We're not going to wag off on you. We're not going to tell you off for the things you haven't done. Let's start with where you are and let's make some improvements together. We are very unusual that we focus only on small and medium-sized businesses, so we understand the issues there, and our service is designed to address their issues, not least that they don't have any specialist knowledge and they can't afford to employ a sustainability manager typically, or somebody who's got this particular knowledge. So they need us to do as much as possible. They don't have a lot of time to address this, so they need us to do all the time-consuming stuff and allow them to focus on changing their business, which is ultimately what we want to do. And we charge, accordingly. We a lot of the organisations who operate a more traditional consultancy model charge an awful lot of money, and they are giving a bespoke service. What we've done to make it affordable in time and money is we've created a standardized process, which still allows us to bespoke the advice we give, but it means we can get through the efficient way, which means we can be very affordable. The other thing I think we always do a full analysis, but we do it in a way that makes it manageable. So a lot of organizations that try to do the job themselves get swamped in the detail because they think they've got to do everything at the nth level of detail from day one. On the other hand, what we found is historically a lot of consultants have kind of skipped over some of the hardest parts because they're difficult to do, especially for smaller businesses. But we've found ways of addressing that, which allows us to start with the data you got and then gradually improve accuracy over time. Because a fuzzy picture of the whole jigsaw puzzle, if you like, is better than a really detailed picture of one corner. And I guess the final thing is, you're dealing with a person who's going to hold your hand through the process. It's a scary process doing this for the first time because most businesses have never done it. And historically, the only option that's been affordable for a small business is to buy into a piece of software that allows them to try and do the calculation themselves. And that's a scary thing to do because, frankly, they don't have time or the inclination to learn how to do that. So you are getting a person who's going to hold you by the hand and guide you through the process. And we're not just throwing a piece of software at you and say, off you go then. And that, I think, is a big thing for a lot of our clients. It's new, it's scary, it's difficult, or it feels difficult. So to have that friendly face walking them through the process is really important.
So talk about the marketplace. Lots of SMEs out there. Is it an expanding marketplace? Are more and more people doing it? Are they knocking on your doors? Do you still have to chase them? What's happening in the marketplace? Is there more competition for your type of services?
Yeah. So, it's really taken off in the last 12 to 18 months, I would say, since COP26 in the back end of 2021. The interest and the demand has really skyrocketed. Partly through those marketplace changes that I was talking about, and partly just through, I think, more and more people realize that they need to do something. Demand's growing all the time. And there are very few consultants still who are focused on SMEs. There's I think a bit of a historic understanding that it's big business is all the problem and that we should focus on big business. And obviously big business does have a massive contribution. But it's still well over 90% of people employed in the UK are employed in small businesses. So, and it's estimated around about half the business related emissions in the country are from smaller businesses. So we can't ignore them.
Yeah.
Demand's growing all the time. There are, a few competitors around, but still relatively few, and there's plenty of space in the market for us all. In fact, it's more the opposite way. I think, the demand is very quickly outstripping supply at the moment. So that's why it's important for us to be able to scale up to help the country do what it needs to do and help companies do what they need to do as much as it is for our own ambition.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. No, that's a really exciting marketplace. We like expanding marketplaces because those are the opportunities for businesses to grow and scale. So. Yeah,
absolutely. And I still think we're scratching the surface, really. If you think today, I think of us in a lot of ways like an accountant. So most people wouldn't start a business today without having an accountant. I think in 10 to 15 years' time, most businesses will need a carbon accountant or a carbon consultant.
Yeah.
So right now I know of, literally I can count the number of carbon consultants that I know in Gloucestershire on the fingers of one hand. But then just think how many accountants there are. So that's the way the opportunity lies, I think.
Brilliant. Yeah. Wow. That's a great vision. And and thinking in terms of what the marketplace will take you in terms of opportunities. So let's talk a bit about the business and yourself now. So how do you manage to not become overwhelmed by everything that needs to do and happen, etc.? What's your tactics?
Well, I'll be honest, like a lot of personas, I do put in a lot of hours. But I am very, very, I try to be very planned about what I do. So I've got a 3-year business plan. I know exactly what I'm trying to achieve this year. I break that down into a set of quarterly objectives, and I do a 90-day business plan. And then the first thing I do every Monday morning is I consult my 90-day plan, and I write out a plan for the week. So I do have a very structured approach, and that has proven to be really, really useful, because it helps keep me on track, but also helps me keep the bigger picture in place.
Absolutely. And that level of structure is excellent. And that's the type of thing that we always encourage anybody to do. And the clients that work with us, we definitely encourage that level of thinking and doing. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think the other thing is I've always had in mind the vision of having a bigger organization. So right from the word go, I've tried to systemize everything. I've tried to create standardized processes, standardized toolkits, which in the early days of the business were over the top. But I had the time to create them because I didn't have so many clients. Now, I'm so glad because it's the opposite. We've got lots of clients and not much time. But because of standardized everything, processed, created toolkits that allow us to do it, it means that we've got more time. We've still got some time to, develop the business and grow the business. So that's probably the key thing.
Yeah. Very much so. That's next. Very, very important, having processes, and they can be written down in any sort of form or structure, but the ability then to help your new team members grow by taking on the processes and procedures. But you can also then improve them as well, because if you don't have something written down, how do you make an improvement on thin air? How do you make an improvement something that's not the same every time?
Absolutely. But it's not just for employees. I think having those processes actually, it simplifies life for yourself as well, because you're not continuing using brain capacity on how am I going to do this. The things that you do regularly, I just know I pick up the tool, and I've already got the process in the tool, and all I do is work through it step by step, and I don't have to think about how I'm going to do it. I'm just thinking out what I'm doing.
So you've taken on 2 new hires, which is really exciting, because you were only looking for 1 and found 2 in terms of doing that. So how are you going to keep the culture that you and your business partner created in the first place? What are you going to do to keep the culture going and the structure of it?
Well, we did quite a lot of work last year on. We'd previously done some work on our vision and our mission statements and so on. We did a lot of work last year on the values that we want to embody in the business and what do we want to stand for. And we really went quite in depth on that. So it's not just like half a dozen words, but we actually said, what if we're going to embody, if these values are going to truly live, what does that mean we actually have to do in a nuts and bolts way every day in order to make that value come to life for us in our business? And we kind of created almost like a list of behaviors of how we'd like to operate and how we'd like to behave and how we'd like to hold ourselves accountable to. And so I actually referred to those in the recruitment process. I thought I don't want to recruit somebody who can't sign up to at least trying to striving for those values. And secondly, on the very first day, we went through those values again and those behaviors and said, okay, this is what the standard that we're looking for. Recognize that nobody's perfect and we don't always manage to live up to that, but we're striving to do that. And if you're prepared to strive to it, then we'll get where we need to get to. So that was, what we've tried to do. And then it's a case of then holding those in mind, I guess, and constantly striving to live up to that and hold ourselves accountable to the standards of behaviour we'd like to be, we'd like to achieve.
Mm. Oh, that's brilliant, and I totally agree with all of that. And you and I both in the human business accreditation organisation, because we both believe in that structure. If I may, I think one of the elements to add in, which we've done in our business, is once a week we actually pick a value and we discuss it as a team, because it helps us to enact in terms of what does that value mean and what's the behaviours and have we lived up to it, etc. So we actually diarise it into our activity. So.
Yeah, I think to us, we're still getting used to having a team. And so we've still got some work to do on what's the best way to work as a team rather than as individuals. And so, that's something which we can look at and think about.
Brilliant. So cash, really important in any business, especially in a small business in terms of doing it. So how do you keep an eye on cash in the business?
Yeah, so that's something which I do take a personal interest in. We started the business with very little cash, a little bit of personal cash that I had, but we've been able to grow through reinvesting the profits that we made so far. So we have no debt. It's all been built on the profits that we made. So. That means that, on a weekly basis, I make sure that the accounts are up to date and have a look. Each month, I do I do the bank consolidation. Lots of business owners would bring other people in to do that. At some stage, I will have to, but I still do that, which means that I keep a very close eye and I know exactly what's being spent where. And then what I've also started to do this year, particularly as we've got fees, and one thing we can't do is get in a position where we can't afford to pay them, is each month I now do a 3-month cash flow projection. So, what I'm trying to do there is to spot if there's going to be any pinch points ahead of time, so we've got time to do something about it.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that's really good, and that's very important. And to be honest, even as your business grows, owning the responsibility of ensuring that there's sufficient cash in the business and the accounts being right is something that you'd never really lose as a responsibility. But lots of business owners, I think, would like to get rid of it, but forget that actually, you're giving out the activity of it, but the ownership should still sit with yourselves in terms of doing that. Brilliant. So we talked about customers and markets. What marketing tactics work for you guys? What's been successful to date?
So we started the business and generating sales leads through networking, and that's still an important business generator for us. But actually, the most successful thing we've done, and one of the best things we did, is getting on for 2 years ago now. I read a book by a chap called Marcus Sheridan called They Ask You Answer, which is a marketing process based on the idea, really built on the insight that the first thing anybody does these days if they want to buy something is go onto Google and ask about it. And so the principle is, if you answer that people are asking in Google in your website, Google will get to know that and will start to funnel people towards you. And I started using that system in May 2021. It took about 3 or 4 months to take hold. But then once it did, we actually started getting people coming to us saying, actually, we need your help with our carbon footprint, please. The very first time that happened, I nearly fell off my chair because up until that point, we had to go out and find all of our sales leads. And then when suddenly he rang me up and said, oh, yeah, we need a carbon footprint. Can you tell me about how you can help us? It was an amazing moment. And we're now at the point where actually most of our leads are generated that way.
Wow. Through the website or through your... Do you do videos then in terms of doing that?
We do some videos, but it's mostly written content, to be honest. Videos is one of those things that Marcus Sheridan does recommend a lot. So
yes,
we have done some, but I think we could do more. I have a love-hate relationship with videos. When they come out well, I'm really proud of them, but I find it immensely hard work, kind of emotionally, mentally, to actually do the things. So I have to work myself up to the point where I'm ready to do them.
Brilliant. Oh, I like that. And that's some really great advice and some thoughts for our listeners in terms of that. So let's talk about the industry. What drives you crazy about the industry? If you could have a magic wand, what would you change?
What drives me crazy is people still thinking that a lot of consultants still recommending that you don't need to do a full carbon analysis, what's known technically as a full scope 3 analysis. They tend to ignore some of the trickier stuff like supply chain, saying, oh, it's too hard to do. It's not hard to, it is hard to do, but there are ways in which you can get a handle on it. And as I say, you don't necessarily need nth degree of detail. You don't need to get that really detailed, granular picture from day one. You can start off by understanding what your main missions are. You can then talk to your top 3 suppliers, find out what they're doing. And there's a lot that you can do based on making, some reasonable estimates and some reasonable decisions. So that drives me nuts. What drives me is seeing organisations saying, yes, we committed to achieving net zero by 2027. Thinking, you probably haven't really understood what net zero entails. It's very unlikely that any organisation can. I mean, we're give us our own example. We're a very carbon unintensive business. We do everything remotely and online. We don't drive anywhere. But our net zero plan is aiming for 2030. Any organisation that's a large size or product based business that's aiming for before then has got a tough ask on their hands, and you have to ask yourselves the question: have they really understood what they've signed up for?
Right.
What else? I guess the prices that a lot of consultants charge that completely price SMEs out of the ability to do anything about their carbon footprint. And the fact is, we need to have everybody pulling in the same direction. We can't ignore anyone.
Brilliant. So if we were to meet in 5 years from now, and we're sitting there talking about the last 5 years, what's happened both professionally and personally for you to make those last 5 years really successful?
I feel we're at this really exciting point where we're kind of getting to the end of our startup phase, and we're just starting that scale up. And for us, that means franchising. So always had the goal of building a business that we could grow and put consultants, or what we call carbon coaches, in every town in the country. And for us, I think the best way to achieve that is through franchising. So I guess looking 5 years down the line, I'd be saying, wouldn't it be great maybe not to have a coach in every town, but a coach in every county, maybe, or at least getting close to that would be, an incredible place to find ourselves in. Excellent.
And personally for you?
On a personal level, I guess one of the reasons I started this business was because I see that, people who, I'm now in my 50s, that kind of retirement age is starting to poke into view. And I see a lot of people who retire completely and actually it doesn't do them any good. Because I think if you are going to retire, you need to have something which occupies your brain and your mind and your body as well. So one of the reasons for starting my own business was because I actually kind of never want to completely retire. I want to have something which allows me to continue to be engaged and involved, not 100% of my time, but that continues to occupy my brain and allows me to get involved in stuff that's important and meaningful, because I think that is a way to keep young. So 5 years' time, I'm not going to be ready for that. But maybe what I will be doing is to start to plan how I might start to step back from the day to day.
Yeah.
And that's probably be about the right time to start thinking about that. So, if I've built an organization that is then ready for me to be able to start taking a step back in 5 years, that would have been a good place to be.
Brilliant. Wow. Ian, what a fantastic conversation we've had. Got a good understanding of net zero and what's actually really involved in terms of doing that. And if I'm saying I'm going to do it by 2027, I'm going to be lying. The really sort of how you've built a business, around helping the SME and focusing on the SME market and what their real needs are in terms of doing that, and the structures you've put in place. But you're not just focused on the product, you're actually building the business structure really, really well in terms of understanding your values and principles, the structure of processes and procedures that you need in the business, and the real sort of organization that you're putting in place is absolutely brilliant to listen to. And there's some fantastic takeaways for our audience to sort of really reflect on in terms of doing that. And what really comes across is your passion for helping the country and the world really in terms of reducing the carbon footprint, because we've got to keep the temperature down on the long term, or we will be definitely suffering from all that. And it was fantastic to see your passion coming out through everything you've talked about today in terms of doing that. Now, if I may, we finish off with a quick fire round, a few questions just to give some interesting things from yourself. So off we go. If you could go back to younger you, what advice would you give yourself?
Take every opportunity that comes your way.
Excellent. Which books would you recommend?
My favourite book, How Bad Are Bananas?
Don't know that one. Excellent.
That's subtitled The Carbon Footprint of Everything. Great coffee table book. It literally tells you the carbon footprint of everything from a banana or a piece of paper right up to a nuclear power station or having a baby.
Brilliant. Gonna have to find that one. Apps on your phone, which ones make the most difference for you?
So we put all of our company documents and everything on Microsoft Teams. The Microsoft Teams app works really well. It means I can get to everything from there. So that works really well. Let's go with that. Brilliant.
And my favorite question of all, who's had the most influence on you as a business leader?
So I was lucky enough to attend a talk by a chap called Michael Braungart, who's one of the co-authors of an incredible book called Cradle to Cradle, which is one of the formative books about the circular economy. And one thing he said there has stuck with me and has been absolutely inspirational in everything I've done, which is instead of thinking about how do we do less bad, why not let's think about how we do more good?
Yeah, fantastic phrase. And finally, how can people get hold of you?
So if you go to our website, which is go-positive.co.uk, scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see there's a link there to book a chat. First conversation is always free. In fact, out of as many discussions, like our number one value at the top of that value list is education, and more than trying to make money, what I see my role as being primarily educational. So get on the homepage, scroll down, book a chat, and let's have a chat about your carbon ambition, why it's important to you, what you're trying to achieve. You can also download our free guide, The Road to Net Zero, there as well.
Brilliant. Ian, thank you very much for this conversation today.
Thank you very much, Granger. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's Esus Group esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.